Hey, welcome to Mooney Reads. My name is Beck, and today I am starting a reading vlog. If you watched my TBR, you'll know that I have a bunch of shorter, kind of autumn-adjacent books. I actually have a couple other ones that I recently got that I kind of want to read soon too, so I'll go over some of those here in a minute. But this week I just thought I would focus on reading as many of those as I can while also working some through One Last Stop, which is the buddy read that I'm doing. And I thought it would just be fun to make a vlog along the way. Today is Tuesday, so I suppose I'll do this vlog through the weekend, maybe, or until I get bored. I don't know. I don't really have plans other than I'm going to be reading some things. Before I get through this, I will show you the books that I think I'm going to end up focusing on the most, including the newer books that I didn't get to talk about in my TBR. Obviously, One Last Stop, which I don't plan on finishing this week, but I am going to try to work on it. I think our plan was to try to get through the first half this week and the second half next week, but the plans are very loose. Other books. I guess first I'll talk about the spookier ones that I think I'm going to wind up reading. In my TBR, I talked about volume 6 and 7 of Girl from the Other Side, which is like horror and wholesome all at the same time. I love the series so far. I've got my reread of Mooncakes. Then I also have a poetry collection, After the Witch Hunt by Megan Fowley. Don't know if the contents are spooky, but the cover is spooky, so there that is. Now, a new one that I got a couple of days ago, is Life of Melody, which is basically these two guys end up incidentally having to raise a baby together and end up falling in love, which sounds adorable. And then I have one more graphic novel that's not necessarily autumnal, but I'm super excited about it. That's the third volume of Boys Run the Riot. Should I save this because I don't know when volume 4 is coming out? Probably. But also, why wait when I can just read it now? And, instant gratification. So I have this too, even though it's not necessarily autumnal or spooky or anything. Then I actually have a little bit of nonfiction that I'd like to get to as well. I've got Discourse on Colonialism, which I've already read the intro of, and it didn't take that long, so I imagine, unless it's super dense, I could probably finish this in a sitting. So that's the main thing, and then if I get that done, I'm going to read Capitalist Realism, Is There No Alternative by Mark Fisher, which, I already wanted to read, obviously. I clearly bought it. I'd heard about it, I think, from maybe one or two different people, and then I had a conversation with Brianna about it, and then I've since seen 2 or 3 TikToks reference it. So I think I just really need to get to this sooner rather than later. Hopefully my reading week will wind up looking something... Oh, nope, these are upside down. Hopefully my reading week will end up looking something like this, and also some of this, though I don't anticipate finishing it. Today is actually fall break at the school that I teach at, and I don't have any work shifts, so this is the first day in almost 3 weeks that I've actually had a whole day off to do whatever. Mostly I had to clean because, of course, this would also be the day that my apartment complex would have to check my stuff in order for me to renew. But other than the thing that's already happened, I have no plans. So I'm probably just going to check my emails and then get some reading done. Though clearly I'm going to have to pick a seat other than the one I was planning on because Remy has claimed it as her own and is doing a very good job napping. So I decided to go ahead and pick up Life of Melody. And so I read that. It did not take very long at all. I don't know if I talked very much about the premise. Basically, these two different magical creatures find a human baby in the woods, and they both want to keep it. You've got like a troll adjacent, I guess, kind of creature and a fairy. They can't decide who gets to keep it, so neither of them wants to give up the baby, so they begrudgingly kind of both take care of it. So you have like kind of raising a baby together trope, also fake marriage, and kind of enemies to lovers, not like mortal enemies or anything like that, but they definitely don't like each other. So at the beginning. So this was super cute. There's another kind of piece of the plot in this, but I won't like elaborate because I feel like that's spoilery. I will say that they do like physically fight a couple of times during this, which I think is worth like pointing out because I know that that's could be a negative or triggering for some people. And if they were humans, I think it would have bothered me more. Like if there wasn't the fact that they were creatures and there's stuff with that. So that didn't bother me personally because of that, but it might bother somebody else. However, for the most part, this was so sweet and cute. I would read so much more of this. Like I would have loved to see their progression like stretched out, especially because this does span a long time. I understand why if they're going to put out in a one shot why it would be the size that it is, but I would absolutely read like a whole series of them. Even just them being domestic, like after the end of this. It was a sweet, short, fluffy read. Don't really have much more to say on it. I still have kind of a lot of time left during the day, and I feel a little bit weird because I feel like I'm not doing anything. Like, I feel like I could sit and just, like, read a whole lot of things, but I also feel like I should be doing something, you know? Even though I've cleaned and checked my emails. And this is the first day that I've had off in, like, 2 weeks. 3 weeks? Calendar. Yeah, it has been 2 weeks since I've had a break. So I should just feel okay vegging and reading all day. But instead I feel like I'm not doing things right. Capitalism is a brain disease. Okay, I think I'm gonna read some Girl from the Other Side. I finished volumes 6 and 7 of The Girl from the Other Side. I mean, I can't see very much because it's the 6th and 7th volume, right? It was creepy. It was wholesome. At the end, I'm concerned. I really think that every single one of these leaves off on a cliffhanger. Because I had gotten, I think, volume 6, and I read that it was like, gonna have this huge cliffhanger, and there was a cliffhanger, but it was no larger than any of the other ones in the series. In fact, I think 7's cliffhanger was more concerning than 6. And I don't have volume 8. I'm just gonna have to hope that the next 2 are available at the store. I don't actually know how long the series is, and I'm a little concerned. A little concerned. A lot concerned. Because there's a direction that it's going, and I hope that it makes a turn. I hope it goes somewhere else. Like, I know, logically, it probably won't have a perfect happy ending, right? That's just not how things work. But what if they did? What if they did? And anyways, I'm on a pretty good roll here with 3 books now done. I should probably eat food, so I think I'm gonna cook, probably watch some YouTube, and then figure out what to read from there. But while I wait for water to boil, I'm going to make the Iron Widow post that I've been meaning to make on Instagram. That book was so good, and if I start talking about it in this vlog, it'll just take up the whole time, so you'll have to wait for my wrap up for that, though. I've got a TikTok about it, and I'll have an Instagram post up about it. But for now, I guess I'll show you the process that I sometimes go through trying to figure out what to do for a picture. With this, I figured I would do like some sort of background for it because I've recently taken pictures using shelves a lot, and I recently used one with the table, so black made sense with this, and honestly, using the leather jacket as a background, it just, I guess, like, goes with the vibe, like the kind of badassery, that is Zetian. And then from here, I've got to figure out lighting, which is honestly always the worst part, because I have no fucking idea what I'm doing at any point. I like to try to do things when there's daylight, because it just usually ends up looking good, but sometimes it doesn't. And I have to use my ring light, which is, like, on its last leg. Here is the ring light that I use sometimes. It is completely busted. This ring light is actually kind of upside down, not that it matters because it's a circle, but this is where it's supposed to be screwed into. But clearly that broke, and one of my friends figured out that you could just unscrew the piece that held the phone, turn it upside down, and screw it into that. So that's what I've done. It keeps turning off and on some, but you know, I do what I can. So, checked in. The water was at a little bit of a simmer. It's less now that I've put the noodles in, but we're halfway through and rethinking the picture a little. Decided to maybe attempt books as outfits sort of a thing. I have a couple of reds that would work. Unimpressive, but it's dinner.
All right, challenge accepted. Good morning, Hank. It's Tuesday. Let's talk about the fastest things in the universe.
Alright, so I have posted my Black Widow post. I have eaten, watched YouTube, watched TikTok. And now I think I want to make cookies. So I'll be doing that and then reading while they cook. I'm thinking I might move to the nonfiction while they're cooking and then see how I feel, and we'll go from there. Cookies are done. Reading was not done because I had to finish the YouTube video that I was watching, and then update my Goodreads and stare at TikTok for a while. So, I'm gonna finish eating these and probably continue to scroll through TikTok or find something on YouTube. Then I'll read. So I'll check back in when something happens. The first batch came out pretty normal, and the second batch was a little bit toasty because I got distracted after my alarm went off. But I guess I'll see after they cool off if they're too toasty or not. They don't look burnt, so that's good. Alright, it is now a little while later. I have moved to the floor because that's just how it goes sometimes. But I finished Discourse on Colonialism, and there really is a lot in here for such a small book. I'll be honest, some of it went a bit over my head, talking about philosophers and everything like that. Like, some of the specifics I was just not really familiar with, and both in the intro and in the interview at the end, they talk about surrealism, and I think I understand how it pertains to some of this. However, I feel like since I don't know that much about it, I'm probably missing something. But in this, he's basically talking about how morally corrupt colonialism is at its core. And he does this by talking about the things that he's seen, but more than that, he does this by talking about events that have been happening. He pulls a lot of different writings from a lot of different people, from, people who were, like, generals, people who were philosophers, people who were religious leaders, all sorts of different types of people, showing that in order for there to be colonialism, there has to, like, the colonizers have to basically lose a piece of their humanity in order to see these other people as less than human. That was a big part of it. The part of it that connects more to surrealism is when he talks about, I guess, where to go from there, which is not the main focus of this one. I think it's the main focus of his other work that they mention in the interview, but he does talk about it a little bit. Basically talking about the fact that you can't necessarily revert back to old ways, especially when current ideas of old ways are also impacted by colonialism. But you have to kind of do a certain amount of reimagining, and it's my understanding that he goes more into, like, how he's connecting with his African roots via surrealism and some of his other stuff, which sounds really interesting, especially considering some of the stuff that he says in here. But this was a searing condemnation of colonialism, as it should have been. He really does not sugarcoat anything. He really just calls it like it is. I'll just read the first few sentences of this. A civilization that proves incapable of solving the problems it creates is a decadent civilization. A civilization that chooses to close its eyes to its most crucial problems is a sick civilization. A civilization that plays fast and loose with principles is a dying civilization. Yeah. And then from there he goes on to talk about the horrors of colonization. And one of the big things that he also talks about is looking at Hitler, because this was written in 1955, so this was right after World War II and all of that. And people are rightfully talking about how horrendous Hitler was, but he also talks about the fact that the big reason why he's the person that gets focused on is because he was taking things that were already being used against folks in places being colonized and were using it on people in Europe. And that is why people started to focus on it. And then he also talks about how, each person is complicit in all of this, in the atrocities. People who are complicit within the system, even if they're not the ones up there making the decisions, there are still a lot of people who are working to make colonization happen. So there's a lot of good stuff in here, even if I think having a deeper understanding of some of the references that he was making and the people that he was talking about would have been helpful. I still got a lot out of it. That's Discourse on Colonialism. Doesn't feel that late to me because I've been not going to bed at a reasonable time whatsoever. I do have work in the morning, like 11, not too early. We'll see what ends up happening. And I'll check back in when I've got something else. So I just got off work. It was a short shift, which is nice. I did end up getting a couple of books because, of course. So I went ahead and bought volume 8 of Girl from the Other Side, and ordered volume 10. Should I have waited to get volume 8 until I have volume 9? Probably, because that's how I've been making myself do it. However, some of the manga, it's a little bit difficult to get in, so I would prefer to not accidentally not have it. So I just went ahead and got it. And I also got an arc. They let me have first dibs on it because they know I've read the first book. But it's Aristotle and Dante dive into the waters of the world. I'm gonna have to read it sooner rather than later because I think that other people are going to want to read it. I'm not sure if I'm gonna vlog my way through reading it or not. I'm honestly not sure if I should talk a whole lot about it. I do know that there was some complicated stuff happening on Twitter a while back with the author, and I'm not sure what the follow-up to that looked like, if there was one. I know that he said some kind of transphobic things. He misgendered somebody and then didn't take the kind of responses that people had very well, which that sucks, but I do know that it's not a like super straightforward situation. It's not like a J.K. Rowling level offense. But now I don't have to make the decision as to whether or not to financially support it. So that's nice. It's doubtful that I'll read it through this vlog because I'm going to be finishing One Last Stop first. But yeah, that was my day. Short shift. Probably going to have dinner, and I might read a little bit before my Zoom call that's happening a little bit later tonight with Brianna. Once a week, we usually sit and chat for a few hours. It's a good time. So I'll check back in once I've done any sort of reading. So today is definitely a kind of burnt out, do nothing sort of a day. I have not really been getting breaks from work and other stuff like that. So today is going to be reading and vegging out, and we'll see what else. I'm going to continue working my way through One Last Stop for a little while, and then I'll see what I want to do in a bit. Okay, so I got to the halfway point of One Last Stop. It is so good, and it's really easy to get through. Like, I feel like I'm reading it very fast. But it is excellent so far. I am super stoked to get to the second half, but I'm going to stop right now because I don't want to get too far ahead, since this is a buddy read. But it's very good. I'm very much enjoying it. So next, I think I'm going to work some on Boys Run the Riot, Volume 3. So I finished Volume 3 of Boys Run the Riot, and I really can't say too much, but I do definitely had thoughts have thoughts on the direction that it went. And I think it's a very interesting conversation on identity and coming out and stuff like that. So, this was good. I'm excited for the next volume. Not that I know when that will come out. No idea. It's probably not anytime soon because this just came out. But it was a good time, and I'm really interested into where it will progress next. Alright, so I finished my food. I watched the Paris is Burning commentary and the 30-minute long discussion afterwards. The director was talking, as well as a couple of people who were in the film, and maybe one or two other folks. I'm glad that I watched it. In general, Paris is Burning is an iconic documentary and really puts out really big pieces of the drag community, the gay community in New York in the 1980s. That being said, I had mixed feelings about the director commentary. I kind of wish she would have talked a little bit less. I did appreciate more hearing from the people who were in it. The reason that it was interesting to hear about, like, her context, especially since, like, she directed it. I think that I preferred listening to it in the discussion than in the commentary, partly because, like, she made comments about people throughout it, and there were way too many comments that she made it painfully clear that she was cisgender. Like, the way that she talked about trans people and the whole notion of, like, looking real or, like, being real was way too much in all of her vocabulary when talking about them. So that was disappointing. There was also some stuff that just made it, I guess, clear that their politics were not exactly revolutionary. In particular, there was some discussion about the military that was kind of weird to me and also sort of contradicted itself. So there were pieces of it that were weird and kind of disappointing. However, I'm glad that I watched it. I'm glad that I got, like, particularly hearing about the people who were in it. They also had insight on where those people went afterwards, which was really interesting to hear about. In particular, at the end of the movie, too, they were talking about all the people who'd passed away, and how they passed away. Also mentioning, the fact that there were a lot of people still alive, and, but then going back and talking about, what is it like to still be around when so many people have died, and, like, making new friends when you're in that sort of situation. And they had a, discussion about, like, the legacy and how this movie was able to help keep some of them, still going. It's a way to, like, keep their memory alive. But then they also had a good discussion, like, alongside this also with the, like, American healthcare system and really questioning the notion, that they talked about, like, film and, like, the importance of film and representation, but they also acknowledged the fact that, it can only go so far. This film was instrumental, like, as a documentary in general, and also, like, for the queer community, but so many of these people still died from complications due to AIDS, heart disease, diabetes, like, where are the tangible material changes for these people who are in the middle of this thing that's supposed to bring, I guess, more good to the gay community, or is supposed to be progress? Where's the progress when people are still dying from perfectly preventable things? which I think can go beyond just healthcare and also looking at like hate crimes and stuff like that, and the fact that in the year 2020, like the way that anti-trans murders just absolutely spiked. And it's not looking very much better in 2021. I haven't looked at the numbers recently, so I'd need to double check on that, but I like that it at least like kind of questioned that aspect of it, and I really liked that discussion towards the end. Um, so had mixed feelings about the commentary overall. Did appreciate a lot of the little tidbits in there. Gave me more of an understanding of what the film was, or about like what perspective the film comes from. I was also it was interesting to hear that they also had film of drag kings and the lesbian community too. They just weren't able to fit it in, so they had to focus on the drag queens. Which I thought, it's wild that there's that much material, but it's also very sad because, how big Paris is Burning got. Like, it's good that we have what it is now. It's a good film as it is now. However, it's sad that it's only like a part of the picture, and it's sad that I guess that part of the community got totally left out to that degree. Mixed feelings about that. Kind of wish that they would do something with that footage. I know they said that they like donated a lot of the footage, but it would be cool for them to like go back and put something together. It won't be as in depth probably if they don't have the same amount of interviews. Whatever. So yeah, that was neat. And going from that, I think I'm going to work some on The Gentrification of the Mind by Sarah Schulman, which is about her experience in the 1980s during the AIDS epidemic. And also, one of the big things that she's talking about in here is how people are remembered, or who is allowed to be remembered in the greater public consciousness and why. So I'm going to work on that, and we'll go from there. Here we see a really pivotal moment of change, when art must become something that does not make people uncomfortable, so that they will spend money. The kind of person who is expected to consume art is transformed in the mind of the producer. The people who might very possibly love being expanded by what they see are never given the chance. They're trained to be narcissistic and unimaginative, even if they could be productive, creative thinkers. Drawing a connection between the art that they see and the world in which they live becomes less available. The long-term effects of such conditions is that gatekeepers, producers, agents, publishers, editors, programmers, critics, become narrower and narrower in terms of what they are willing to present, living in a state of projected fear of ever presenting anything that can make someone uncomfortable. There is a dialogic relationship with culture when consumers learn that uncomfortable equals bad instead of expansive. They develop an equation of passivity with art-going experience. In the end, the definition of what is good becomes what does not challenge, and the entire endeavor of art-making is undetermined. Profit-making institutions then become committed to producing what the Disney-funded design programs call Imagineers, the craftsman versions of the Mouseketeers, workers trained to churn out acceptable product while thinking of themselves as, quote, artists. In 1997, I was assigned by the New York Times Arts and Leisure section to do a piece on the new theater scene popping up below Houston, centered on Ludlow Street. For 30 days and nights, I went to see plays and performances and slowly tried to piece together what this new wave's aesthetic and social concern seemed to be. At that point, I did not fully understand the new phenomena of replacement artists from professionalization programs, and was kind of shocked to hear some of the sorts of things the new theater artists were saying and doing. When I realized and articulated in the article some of the values this new movement stood for, the piece was killed. But what I only came to understand years later when preparing this volume is that new artists had no awareness at all of the existence of the dead people who had lived and worked just a few years before on the very streets where they were now working and paying high rents. So I did finish the chapter that I was on in Gentrification of the Mind, but then I stopped to watch a film that's referenced in here. She talks a lot about Jim Hubbard, who she made United in Anger with, which if you have not seen is free on YouTube and you should watch it. It's about ACT UP, which is a group of activists around the AIDS epidemic. The film that I stopped to watch is called Elegy in the Streets. It was a combination of film that Jim Hubbard and his partner Roger Jacoby had put together. From what they say in here, this was put together after Roger's death. The whole thing is silent, kind of bringing forth the literal silence equals death. And it's called Eulogy on the Streets, so it's showing, it starts out with what looks like a remembrance march or something akin to that. Then goes between like protest footage of different types, and then footage of several other things as well. I would recommend that you go watch it without hearing very much of what I have to say, perhaps. I mean, I know that it is 20 minutes of, like, a quiet film, and not everybody likes that or whatever, but if you have any interest in it, I would watch it before you hear what I have to say, because, like he says on the website for it, you know, it's kind of about what you get from it. And I definitely had a frame coming into it with reading this book. So I definitely thought a lot about, you know, with the clear, like, metaphor right off the bat, silence equals death. The whole thing is silent. In taking away the sound and the pieces that you're used to being there, like you don't know what's going on, it strips a layer of, like, understanding all of it. If nobody is going out of their way to remember these people that are lost, you get a huge chunk of, like, the frame of reference just totally taken away. Some of the footage that it goes back and forth between is looking at people who I presume are Jim and Roger. And these clips are more likely to be distorted. Now, some of the clips, like, going throughout it are distorted in different ways. And I feel a similar way about those, but I think that maybe one of the reasons why almost all the footage, it looked like, of those two was inverted or had other effects. And I wonder if that, or at least to me, that represented really, like, what happens when somebody is taken out of the picture. You know, one of them is no longer living. Their presence and their perspective in that doesn't exist in some ways. And in, like, for instance, like the last person, like, if people not preserving their memory is kind of what's distorting that picture. So to me, watching it, it just made me think a lot about, like, the need to preserve it, the need to preserve these people's memory and this movement, because to not talk about it, to not actively have conversations about it, you're contributing to the process of forgetting and ignoring and distorting the past. And thus, as you go on, things just become more and more distorted the more and more you're throwing out, with the potential for, you know, even more problems. I don't know. I could be totally out of line with that reading. That's just what it made me think of. I don't know. The idea of, like, needing in some ways to remember people, especially those that were lost, like, completely needlessly. It's very important to me. I think I've talked at length about my feelings and experience with Trans Day of Remembrance. and kind of how that impacts how I'm looking at the AIDS epidemic. But as important as it is, it's also incredibly daunting. And like how well are we able to actually do that? How much is stuff actually preserved or will be preserved? Because especially when you have these, in Sarah Schulman's framework, these like gentrified ways of remembering overwhelm the number of people who are trying to remember from their perspectives. If you're only getting these certain people's perspectives, even still, you're not necessarily getting the whole picture when there is such an intense movement of forgetting and distorting. I don't know. I might just be talking to talk. I don't know if this makes sense. But those are the things that I'm thinking. So that's what I've got for that. The next chapter that I'm approaching in this is the gentrification of gay politics, which I'm very interested in. Obviously, I'm interested in the whole book, but like that in particular, the tension between assimilationist and queer politic is something that I'm really interested in, and something that definitely integrally shaped the AIDS movement and all of the political stuff in the queer movement around that. So I'm really interested in this next section. I need to get ready for bed sooner rather than later. But the chapter's pretty short. I don't know. We'll see if I end up reading it before I go to sleep. If I do, I'll talk about it, and if not, I'll check back in tomorrow. Okay. I did not check in yesterday. It just didn't happen. I had a long shift and then a date and then was just ready to do nothing. So it's Saturday night. I had another long shift today. I didn't do a whole lot of reading. Well, okay, so I did read a book, but it's like none of the ones that I was really planning on reading, and I don't really want to say too much about it because I feel like I don't know enough to have an opinion about it, and like, I don't know. I read a book on crystals that I had gotten. I've talked about being into them a little bit, and some of my other family is also into them as well. So I got this to see different perspectives on it. The thing with some of this stuff, like a lot of spirituality, it's really interesting to see different people's frameworks. My current personal, I don't know, I feel like this is going to change, and I feel like this might be like whatever. I mean, my own current personal perspective on it is just like it's vibes and nothing else. So it's interesting to see people put like framework around it and see how people use them. I think that they can be useful tools for like setting your intentions and like thinking more deeply about what you want and what you're trying to do. If nothing else. I don't know. But anyways, I read that. And then at work today, I read a little bit more of Gentrification of the Mind. And I'm probably going to continue to read this tonight. Read-o-rama started, and I meant to yesterday, because yesterday was the 15th, the first day I was going to like talk about my TBR and go over it, and that didn't happen, so I guess I'm going to do that today, even though technically tonight and then tomorrow is all of Read-o-rama that I'll have to read these, but that's fine. My shift is shorter tomorrow anyways. So, books that I want to get through. Since I'm already in the process of reading Gentrification of the Mind, I'm just going to keep on that for sure. I think that I can finish it. This has Rama in the title. because it doesn't have to be like Rama in a row, but this has an R, an A, an M, and an additional A. So that'll be for that. And I could technically use it for the fall colors prompt if I needed to, or the spooky word and title, because gentrification is scary and bad. Now I have a few other books that I could read for this. I don't know if I'll get through all of them, but if I'm in a super ready mood tomorrow, I think that I can get through them. We'll just have to see what happens. But I have After the Witch Hunt by Megan Fowley, which could be fall colors because this is like spooky enough for that, and then also spooky word and title. Capitalist Realism by Mark Fisher. If I finish Gentrification of the Mind tonight, I think that I can get through this one tomorrow. Unless it's like super, super dense, but it's tiny. So I think that a sitting will do. This has Rama in the title, and it's also spooky. Capitalism. Spooky. And then I have Mooncakes, my reread of Mooncakes, which has fall colors and could maybe count for the short book by an author of color because one of the authors is a person of color. And then I also have Be Free by Gabby Rivera, which would also count for the short book by an author of color. So I have options. I have several things I would like to get to. Tonight is probably going to be Gentrification of the Mind. Maybe Be Free. I did download it, or I did go ahead and borrow it on my Hoopla. We'll just see where the night takes me. But I'll check back in once I know how it went. Okay. It is Sunday now. Sunday night. Did not read last night, and instead I was just on the internet with my brain turned off. So there's that. I went ahead and read the first 3 volumes of BB Free, or 3 issues. I couldn't find the 4th. If there is a 4th, I should probably check on that. But regardless, read the first 3 issues. The premise is interesting. The main character is a gender fluid person, and they're living in this place years in the future, what is basically Florida, but it's after an epidemic happens and kills off the majority of the rich people, basically, and the United States, like, splits more, I guess, because of, it's not really clear. I would assume some sort of climate issues. But they're trying to gain the freedom from their dad to travel around like they're supposed to be able to. Their dad is funky, like, we don't really know what's going on with him. He seems to be a closet capitalist, which is kind of weird, especially when, like, the earth intentionally, like, killed off a lot of them with the virus or plague or whatever they had. But yeah, there's a lot of different queer rep. I'm pretty sure everyone in it is a person of color, or at least everybody so far is a person of color. The art is really pretty. I don't really know what I would give it, like, rating-wise, because it's a cool concept. But there's not a lot there, and I feel like stuff is happening really fast, and I'm not really getting as good of a grasp on stuff as I would like to. So it's a good read. It's not like my favorite thing ever, but it's really cool, and I would be interested to see what happens else with the series. It is starting to get a bit later, but I do think that I still want to read. I'll probably work on the Gentrification of the Mind. Other than that, I don't think that I've shared that I got another arc from work the other day that I'm pretty excited about. It is Here to Us, which is the sequel to What If It's Us, which I really liked. What If It's Us. I read it well before I knew that BookTube was a thing, I think, because I remember borrowing it from work, I think. I actually don't have a copy of What If It's Us, and I've been meaning to get one. It's out in paperback now, so I probably should. But I have the sequel, and I'm planning on reading it soon because I'm stoked about it. It's kind of chunky. I don't know how much, like, what the difference is, because, like, I know that this is an arc, so sizing and stuff might be different, but it seems bigger than the original. I don't know if I want to reread the first one first before getting into this. It would give me extra incentive to go buy a copy. I do remember the first one with the way that it ended and the feelings that I had. I don't want to say too much because I don't want to overshare about myself or give spoilers to the book. But the ending and the situation with the relationship towards the end of the book felt very personal to me. So I've been a little bit afraid of the sequel, which is actually kind of similar to Ari and Dante, although Ari and Dante, like, on a whole nother level. So these are both sequels that I've been afraid to read because of how personal some of the details in the book are to me. Which is probably a sign that I should, like, chill out and maybe not project everything onto the things that I read, but, you know, yeah, I could be doing worse things. So I'll take what I can get. I'm excited for this. So I will check back in once I've read some more stuff. Alright, it is probably later than I should have stayed up. But I did finish the Gentrification of the Mind. And it was very good. The last few chapters, they spent talking about the change, like, politically within the gay movement, the impact of assimilation, and then they talked about how that impacted literature as well. She spends time talking about, oh, was that so? Accessibility of queer literature and looking at, you know, when gay marriage was this thing that people were pushing and people were talking about, we were starting to see more mainstream representation of certain types of queer people. At the same time, we were seeing less accessibility of gay books by gay people, and that impacted lesbians even more so. I suspect the trans visibility, like, that, even way more minuscule. She doesn't necessarily focus on that as much, probably partly because I would imagine that the market or the prevalence of trans books by trans authors or trans authors in general was even smaller beforehand. So she spends some time talking about that. And so that's another example of kind of like gentrification they're taking out kind of the voices and the ideas of different people within the gay movement and replacing them with these louder, much more palatable ideas of what queerness is. And then she concludes with talking about the fact that in order to confront this, we need to be more okay with the idea of being uncomfortable. Because a really big thing that pushes gentrification, both of ideas and literal gentrification, is tolerating or overlooking pain that's happening towards other people, and focusing on comfort for yourself. And of course, that in order to do that, you would have to ignore the pain because looking at other people's pain is uncomfortable. And that's kind of I guess, the thesis of the conclusion. Editing back here because there's a connection between two of these pieces that I just really wanted to articulate and make and put in here. Like I just got done saying, Sarah Schulman is talking about the fact that a core piece of gentrification is ignoring the pain of other people. And integral to that process would be othering other people or seeing them as somebody else entirely. And that directly connects, I think, with what Amy Cicero was saying in Discourse on Colonialism, where he was saying that colonizers have to deny humanity of the people that they're colonizing. Colonizers step away from that piece of humanity in order to do that. And while there are differences between colonization and gentrification, gentrification comes directly out of colonization and that mindset. So I thought that was really important to point out, is that this is the same losing of humanity, but it's just further othering people who are inside of your community or inside of what could be your community. It was a cool connection, but also, like, when we're talking about gentrification, I think that it's important to recognize its roots to colonization. And while there are differences in the experience of gentrification and the experience of colonization, the fact that both of these come from the same place and come from the same total disregard of other people, ethnocentrism, and supremacy is at the core of both of these things. So all of this comes back to a need for decolonization. That's just an important connection that I saw, so I thought I would put this in here. But I'll go back to what I was saying about gentrification of the mind. I have a lot of thoughts on this, and I really want to go through and really look at this. I am, I think, overdue for a wrap-up in my HIV and AIDS epidemic reading list. That's not the only one that I'm overdue on, honestly. We'll see when all of this happens. It's past 3 a.m. and I'm have ideas percolating, but all of these ideas also involve a lot of planning, and the first wrap-up was a lot of scripting, and hopefully I don't have to script as heavily, but I'm definitely going to have a lot of passages outlined to talk about. These are going to be really lengthy wrap-ups, probably, because the first one that I made was a seriously long time. Granted, moving politics was also very chunky and very dense. But anyways, all that is to say, I finished this. It had a lot of really interesting things to say. I do wish that she would have talked a little bit more about, like, bringing in colonization and voices of color in general. Stuff on the AIDS epidemic in the United States is overwhelmingly white, despite the fact that the AIDS epidemic heavily impacted and continues to heavily impact Black people and communities of color. Not to say that she doesn't mention them at all, because she does. However, there is a focus on white gay men, or at least there's not discussion of the impact within Black communities. There's the impact within the gay communities, and not necessarily looking at that overlap. And also, I think when we're talking about gentrification, while gentrification is different than colonization, gentrification was breeded from colonization. And I think that in order to have like an appropriate analysis of that we should also be talking about colonization. But I also understand that that's beyond the scope of this book, because this was supposed to be more memoir than analysis. Otherwise, she probably would have made it a lot longer, and looked at things differently. But overall, this is very good. I definitely recommend it. Like I said, it's past 3 a.m., so it's bedtime because I have a long shift tomorrow. I've been trying to decide how much longer I want to make this, and I think I'm going to probably film if I read any tomorrow, and I might do Tuesday as well, because I know that I'll have the reading hour on Tuesday, which I did not do last Tuesday because I was cleaning. So I think that if I end it mid-Tuesday, that'll be, I think, a week exactly. So there's the plans. We'll see how it plays out, and hopefully I'll check back in tomorrow. Alright, it is Monday night. I basically just worked today, haven't read yet. Hopefully I updated you after I finished the Gentrification of the Mind. So, I ended up doing a little bit of book shopping at work because the past few days have just been rough, and I don't even know why. I feel like I haven't been in a bad mental place, but also being around people has just been, like, unbearable. I don't know what the deal is. Plus it was a Bones Day, so I was supposed to treat myself. So I got books. I got The Girl from the Sea by Nolly Mox Ostertag, which I've wanted for a while. I loved Witch Boy. So of course I had to get this one. And then since I finished Gentrification of the Mind, I went ahead and picked up Sarah Schulman's newest book, Let the Record Show. Now, I do also have, I think it's called, like, Our America or something like that, that she also wrote, or edited, really. It's a anthology. I will get to that. However, I've really wanted to get to this. I've watched the documentary that she did with... His name is escaping me. I'll put it on the screen, hopefully. I've watched it several times. It's actually probably one of the first big things, like big pieces of the history of the AIDS epidemic that I saw. And so she finally put this out that's about ACT UP. I'm super excited to get to it. Tome Topple might have started today, actually. I don't know. I'm a fucking mess. Yeah, Tome Topple started probably today. They've been doing sprints, but they don't have information pinned. So yeah, Tome Topple started today. So all the more reason to get a tome, because I have really considered reading a fic that been wanting to get to, but the thing is, it's not just 500 pages, it's closer to 1,000, and I either will start it and not finish it, or I will start it and get so sucked in and become completely insufferable around a fandom for whom the canon is trash, which is like just my luck. Like, why do I have to be... Why does my neurochemistry have to grasp onto Glee and Harry Potter? Like, really? Really anything else? Nothing? That's where the nostalgia serotonin's gonna come from. I mean, it could be worse. I could be wanting to, like, re-listen to Dane Cook or something, but fuck, you know? Anyways, I did actually read a little bit today. Think about it. On my break at work, I started Capitalist Realism, Is There No Alternative by Mark Fisher. Didn't get too far into it because I probably only read for like 15 minutes or so. However, I think that I can finish this tonight. So that's probably what I'll do. I'll chill out, eat, finish this, and then if I'm feeling up to reading more nonfiction, I'll start on Let the Record Show. However, I think I'm going to do a separate Tome Topple vlog. Will people want to hear about the same book? It'll be kind of depressing. What the fuck? Sure. I'll be doing a Tome Topple vlog to overlap with this. So I'll check back in when I finish reading this, and this might be the last thing that I read unless I want to get to one of the graphic novels that I still have to read. So it's like an hour and a half later, and I might have lied. I made an Instagram post and a TikTok, and I really, really do want to read the Mark Fisher book. Like, the stuff that it was saying that I remember reading on break is very good. However, my brain is very much in Gentrification of the Mind, Sarah Schulman, on that vibe. So I'm actually probably going to be focused on Let the Record Show for the rest of the night. And if I end up finishing the Mark Fisher book, which hopefully I will in the next couple of days, or if I end up picking up any other small book, I will check back in and wrap this up. It is now quite a few days later, and I realize, editing this, that I did not in fact wrap this up. I did not finish the Mark Fisher book, nor did I read any other graphic novels that night. I finished One Last Stop a few days later, which was really good, but I won't go into that here. We'll just have to wait for the wrap-up on that one, but it was very good. So, I hope you all enjoyed this excessively long vlog, as they tend to be over here. If you've read any of the books that I've mentioned, definitely let me know about them in the comments. Let me know if you have any, like, suggestions based on these. I don't know. But thank you all so much for watching. Bye.